Good afternoon. I'm Chief Sherry Jones, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for today. Please rise for the parading of the colors by the United States Marine Corps from the 6th ESB Bridge Company B in Folsom, the Pledge of Allegiance, the singing of the National Anthem by Councilman Mike Fagan, and the invocation by Rabbi Reuben Abraham, United States Navy Chaplain retired.
Ready, two.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and repeat pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose first stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Hooray!
Ready, two. Order. Colors. Ready, two. Forward, march. Forward, march.
As to your religious persuasion, uncover. Let us join in prayer. Eternal Father, strong to save, by whose abiding love our lives are blessed, and through whose continuing care we are once again able to come together today at this time to commemorate the 73rd anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor that took place on December 7th, 1941. We ask that you remember those who gave their last full measure of devotion in defense of this great nation on what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt most appropriately called the Day of Infamy. Bless those who survived the attack and who are still living witnesses this day, and keep them from all harm as they continue to be an inspiration for all who serve in the armed forces of the United States of America. May all who are today actively engaged in the global war on terrorism never forget the lesson these survivors have taught the millions who have come after them, that we must never let our guard down, and we must remain ever vigilant in our efforts to protect and defend our country so that it will remain a beacon of light to all who seek liberty and justice in this world. O Heavenly Father, we ask that you bestow your special blessing upon all who serve in harm's way at this time. Give them the strength and courage they need to meet the challenges that face them. May they feel your compassion as they work to make this world a safer place for all humankind. Ease the pain of their loneliness, especially at this time of the year, as they fulfill their assigned missions far from those whom they love and who love them. May they feel your presence in their lives as daily they face both danger and uncertainty in the fulfillment of their duties. Protect them as they tirelessly and unceasingly commit themselves to the completion of the task at hand. We ask your blessings upon all those loved ones who await the return of their warriors who serve so far away from home. Help them maintain the safe and loving homes to which their loved ones will hopefully return. Give those who have been wounded a complete healing, both physically and spiritually. And may those who have given their lives in the last full measure of devotion to this country find eternal rest and everlasting peace at your side. May their loved ones know with certainty that their sacrifice was neither empty nor meaningless. We ask all of this in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. On behalf of the survivors, Brigadier General Stephen Shapiro, State Representative Tom Burt, and our honored guest here today, I would like to thank the Marine Corps, Color Guard, and Rabbi Abraham for taking time out of their busy schedule to be here. At this time, I would like to introduce Alex Horanzi, our Pearl Harbor survivor and president of the December 7th, 1941 Pearl Harbor Remembrance Association. Alex?
Ladies and gentlemen, on the behalf of Pearl Harbor survivors, Libertyville, Philadelphia Chapter Number 1, we welcome you to the Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. December the 7th, memorial service is for our fallen comrades. 74 years ago, at this very hour, the naval forces of the Empire of Japan were bombing and striking the ships, the airfields, and the barracks on around Pearl Harbor. That peaceful Sunday was transformed into a day that will live in infamy. America was a thrust greatest of all world conflicts. Those who survived the attack and joined us this afternoon are living witnesses to the extraordinary history of December 7, 1941, an event that changed our nation and ultimately the world forever. At Hickenfield, Wheelerfield, Schofield Barracks, Pearl Harbor, and all nearby points, together we made sacrifices that showed daring heroism and courage. Shock and anger marked that day. After 2 waves of assault lasting less than 2 hours, it was all over. The nation and our society will never be the same. No event in American history more immediately galvanized our country. Not a date in our history has been more certain at the point from which so much of the history can be traced. Yes, I can say we are a unique group of World War II veterans that survived Pearl Harbor attack. We are living witnesses to the extraordinary history that was created on December 7, 1941, an event which led us into World War II, an event that changed our great nation and the world. After December 7th attack, many of the survivors went forward to fight other battles on land, sea, and air in the Pacific. Some came back, others sacrificed their lives. Those who gave the last full measure of devotion for our country never had a second chance, and at home that many of us had endured 4 years of war service in the Pacific. The Pearl Harbor survivors here today are the part of the first greatest generation which paved the way for others to follow. It was a difficult road, but when Americans take on a challenge as a united country, there is no limit to what we can achieve, no matter the adversity before us. Today our world remains a dangerous place, and this nation cannot afford to let the lesson of Pearl Harbor be lost to the future generations. So join us with Remember Pearl Harbor and keep America loved. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But I'd like to introduce you another Pearl Harbor survivor. He's sitting right over there. His name is Joniak. Mike, would you stand up for him?
We are honored today with our guest speaker, Brigadier General Stephen Shapiro, who's currently serving in the United States Army as Commander of the Defense Logistics Agency Troop Support in Philadelphia since August of last year. Leading more than 2,900 civilian and military personnel, his command procures more than $14.5 billion worth of food, clothing, and textiles, construction and equipment, pharmaceuticals, medical supplies and equipment, as well as industrial hardware items for America's warfighters and other customers worldwide. He has been deployed to Kabul, Afghanistan, and has served in Europe and the United States since his commissioning in May 1985. Without further ado, please welcome General Shapiro.
Well, good afternoon and thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I am Brigadier General Steve Shapiro. I've been in the Army 30 years this coming summer, so we've been doing this for quite some time. It's a thrill for me to be here today, and also I've got my wife Mary here in the front row. And so we get to do things like this, every once in a while. And we love coming out and meeting veterans from previous wars, and we love coming out and meeting people. So thank you for asking us to be here today. It's an honor for the family. I want to thank Mr. Jim Donahue. Jim, thank you for asking me to come here today. It is an honor to be here with Pearl Harbor survivors and their family members. And I want to thank Alex Rasny, who I get to see quite often in Northeast Philly. Thank you for what you do and what you did for our country. And I didn't know but Mr. Joniak, John, thank you so much, sir, for what you did that day.
Thank you.
No, thank you, sir. He was telling my wife and I what he did that day, and it's just amazing what Americans will do when they're under pressure. So thank you so much for what you did. So here we are on a Sunday, 73 years ago, almost to the hour when you think about the time change. Pearl Harbor's under attack, 73 years ago right now. And it was a stunning event, stunning the country, stunning the military forces, but it really did galvanize Americans, as Alex said, and did begin our entry into the Second World War. President Roosevelt that evening gets in front of Congress for a declaration of war and calls the 7th of December a day that will live in infamy. And Congress, of course, and the American people were right behind him, and we did declare that war that day, and soon after that, the Nazis declared war on us, and the Italians declared war on us. And within a week of Pearl Harbor, we are in a world war. We are a major combatant in a global struggle of good versus evil. Good versus evil. So today we remember that day, that week, if you would. 2,400 Americans died that day, men and women, military, civilian. They all perished in Pearl Harbor. It didn't matter your race. It didn't matter your creed. It didn't matter your religion. It was everybody. Everybody was in it together as Americans. And so, and in the Army, we don't have much association with the Navy. This is the largest association I've had with the Marine Corps, the Navy, since I've been and I remember, my first association with the Navy, and by the way, all cards on the table, my dad, former Marine, sergeant in the Marine Corps in the early 50s. Hoorah. But I was not really raised in a military family. But when I was a teenager, I was 13. And we went on a family vacation. We went out to Hawaii. And so you go there, you're on the beach in Honolulu, and you're doing what you do as a teenage kid out there. I had a couple of brothers and a sister. And we're on the beach, and then you go do things. We went to see Don Ho, and you do all the shows. And it's just a lot of fun. And then we jumped on a boat. And said, where are we going? We're going fishing. Now we're going to go to a place called Pearl Harbor. Okay, let's go. And it's, kind of a fun ride out to Pearl Harbor. You go out there. And then, and this is, again, 1977. And at a certain point, everybody kind of gets quiet. And you don't know as a young man why everybody's getting quiet. And we're passing Arizona. And, you just think, what, the men were buried in the Arizona. And what happened that day. And you don't think about it much until something like 9/11. And then my wife and I and our kids have been to Ground Zero before. And you get that same feeling that you get when you pass the Arizona when you go there. Or you go to a place like Shanesville here in Pennsylvania. So it's just a solemn moment, and then I'll always remember. And I'll be great to come to our day. Pardon me. So, we think about 9/11 on a day like today, too. And you remember how you felt that day. But today, on the 7th of December night, here, we remember the sacrifices of those men and women who wore that uniform. And so, you know, they entered World War II, and, you know, just millions went to the Pacific, went to Europe, or stayed at home and defended their nation. It was amazing. And so today, I think, you know, Alex, you said it right. It's not just, you know, we come here to remember Pearl Harbor or remember that day. But you know, we're duty bound not just to remember, but to learn the lessons. And I think you hit it right. I think the lesson is be ready. Always be ready, because you never know. And it's absolutely, what a great gift it is to be born in America. You know, to be an American is just an amazing gift. And you should always remember that, you know, when things are bad, how lucky you are just to be born in this great nation. And so as an Army guy, I haven't been to the Pacific a lot, but I've got 10 years in Europe, on and off. And, you know, we went there initially with one child, and eventually, you know, we were there with teenage girls. And so when you're in Europe, what do? You travel, of course. And one of the things we loved to do was to go to the World War II battlefields. Had the opportunity after I came back from Iraq, my first tour in Iraq, right after the invasion, to take the family, put them in the minivan, and drove to Normandy. And spent a week at Normandy. And if you've never done that, that's a sight to see. And so we go to Normandy, you go to battlefields like that. And at the either beginning or at the end, you tend to go by the cemetery, the American Military Cemetery. I was in Luxembourg for 2 years, about 10 minutes from General Patton's grave. And people who are buried there are Battle of the Bulge participants. So these are just great places. And you're reminded of, you know, the conversation of the greatest generation. And these young men and women who came out, you know, I mean, all across America, and volunteered. 16 million people under arms today at our peak. And you say to yourself, well, that was the greatest generation. And then you think about a day of 9/11, I tend to harken back to that. And I have served in Iraq a couple times, Afghanistan a couple times. I've got a lot of time away from home since 9/11. And you watch the young men and women who are doing what they're doing today. And people have said it, and I don't claim to be a member of the greatest generation. I'm not here to claim, you know, we're as good as you. It's not a competition. But I watched some of those young men out there today. I was in Afghanistan probably 2 weeks ago down here. Just got back from a business trip. And we went out on a patrol because I had to go do some business outside of the air base. And what these young men and women do all day, every day, and how good they are with their tasks, and how much they love their country. And you know, maybe there is another greatest generation. I'm not part of it. They're much younger than I am, but they're amazing people every day, and we should be very proud of them. So I'm getting emotional. I lost my place in my speech, but I want to find my place here. Because it was just an unprovoked attack, and so a lot of what happened 73 years ago also happened 13 years ago, and we just can't afford to every 50 years learn that lesson. So gentlemen here, Pearl Harbor survivors, 2 of you, John and Alex, thank you so much for what you did, and just for your presence. It's just grateful to meet men like you and understand what you did that day. And it's inspirational, because you fought for our freedom. I mean, you weren't thinking about it then as a man. You're just kind of fighting to stay alive. But when you harken back on that, you're fighting for our freedom. And then we've got not just Pearl Harbor survivors here, but family members of Pearl Harbor survivors. Everybody in this room has got an association with Pearl Harbor through a family or a friend or something like that. So thank you all for what you and your families have done. Now, one thing I often do when I'm sitting here talking to veterans groups, and I know there's a lot of veterans in this group, is I talk about how lucky I am, and I think, gentlemen, you were very lucky too. When you came home 70 years ago, from where you were, your nation embraced you. I mean, the GI Bill of the late 40s and early 50s was an amazing piece of government legislation, probably one of the greatest single pieces of legislation ever known to mankind. And there was a lot of you. There's a lot fewer of us now, but when I came back from Desert Storm, for 6 months I couldn't buy a drink at a bar. I can't today. I meet friends from college and I can't buy a drink. It's because people love you. They're so happy. I hope it was like that back in your day. But there's a generation in between. There's a generation in between. People like me and people like you. And those are the Korean War veterans and the Vietnam veterans who, when they came home, didn't necessarily come back to a grateful nation. Came back to a nation that was probably conflicted and had very different emotions. So, when given the opportunity to thank Vietnam veterans and Korean veterans, I never lose that opportunity. So for those who served in Vietnam and those who served in Korea, thank you for what you did, and welcome home. a Sunday and do this, because I love just coming out and meeting folks who serve their country. So thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what your family members did. Gentlemen, thank you for that day 73 years ago. Thank you for manning that gun and taking those shots. I appreciate that, John. So I'll close up here and just say, again, thrilled to be here today. Thank you very much for coming. And may God bless every one of you, bless our veterans, and bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, General and Mrs. Shapiro, for being here today. At this time, I would like to introduce State Representative Tom Mert, who is a retired Army veteran and was deployed for 14 months in Iraq himself. He is also a Pearl Harbor survivor nephew. His uncle was Paul Brown and was a member of our organization. We're honored that also Denise is here, Paul's daughter, so thank you for being here today. And Paul, Tom, it's yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's great to be here with my cousin Denise, who, as Sherry mentioned, is a daughter of a Pearl Harbor survivor. I just want to tell you a little bit about my Uncle Paul, Paul Brown. My Uncle Paul was serving on the USS Shaw at Pearl Harbor, and he was there on December 7, 1941. And for a couple months after the attack, he was missing. They didn't know what happened to him. And I think for a short time, he kind of reattached himself to another ship. And then when the USS Shaw its bow had been blown off in the attack, and temporarily attached a temporary bow, and they sent the Shaw under its own power, which was kind of a big deal. It had been damaged so badly, to San Francisco to get a permanent bow so they could participate in the war. And my grandparents, who lived in Lawndale, northeast Philadelphia section of the city, not far from the agency, sir, and they thought that my Uncle Paul had been killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor because they hadn't heard from him, and they got a notice that he was missing in action. And anyway, it was probably, I guess, February of 1942, and my mother went to the movies at the Crest Movies, which was right on Rising Sun Avenue in northeast Philadelphia. And before the movies back then, there used to be black and white clips of the, the update on the war, what was happening, what we were doing. And it was from morale and support of the American citizens. And my mother was getting ready to watch the movie, and she was probably only in 7th or 8th grade at the time. But before the movie started, there was a black and white clip of the USS Shaw coming into San Francisco Harbor to get its repairs done. And my Uncle Paul was on the front of the ship, waving and smiling. And my mother recognized him, and she cried out, and they turned on the house lights, and they said, what's the matter? She said, that's my brother, he's missing. And so at the end of the movie, they cut the piece of film. They don't have films anymore, but back in the day they did. They cut the piece of acetate, of plastic film, and they gave it to my mother so she could bring it home and show my grandparents that Paul Brown was alive. He was in San Francisco. And then they contacted him through the Red Cross, and they were able to discern that he survived the attack and that he was alive and well. And I remember my Uncle Paul telling us through the years, he said, Pearl Harbor was really a very, very difficult experience, but he said it wasn't as bad as Guadalcanal and some of the other engagements that still were to come before the end of the war. And so unfortunately, my Uncle Paul died a few years back, and towards the end of his life, he really was able to overcome his post-traumatic stress and some of the struggles that he had over the years, and talk to children about Pearl Harbor and about his experiences. He was featured in many newspaper articles and so forth. And he really, I remember when I was in school, I used to, he would come over to the house, and I used to think that you could just sit him down and pull the information out of him and get a history lesson. And it wasn't like that. It was a very painful, difficult recollection for my Uncle Paul and for all Pearl Harbor survivors. What I really wanted to talk to you today about, just for a few minutes before I read the letter from Governor Corbett, is to say that even though the number of our actual Pearl Harbor survivors is dwindling, our organization, the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, in this annual event must remain intact, and we must be strong and vibrant and relevant. If we ever stop recognizing the attack on Pearl Harbor, I fear that our nation might possibly forget what happened to Pearl Harbor, or as General Shapiro reminded us, what happened on 9/11. But even more than that, we certainly never want to forget the men and the women who served there. Men like Alex Horansky and John Joniak, who are with us today, and men like my Uncle Paul, who gave the best years of their lives to our nation and sacrificed their own youth and their own innocence to defend our country after the Japanese attacked us in 1941. These men and women answered a call to duty. They didn't go to war because they loved fighting. They were called to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They were ordinary people who responded in an extraordinary fashion. They rose to their nation's call because they wanted to protect our nation that had given them and given us so much. They volunteered for military service because they believed in the destiny and the promise of the American dream and the essential goodness of America. The very freedom and prosperity that our generation sometimes takes for granted was guaranteed and paid for by the men and women that we honor today. Sometimes people ask rhetorically, either in the media or sometimes they stop me and they say, don't you think maybe it's time that we stop talking about what happened back then, the Japanese, our allies, and so forth? And some of us might say, how can our nation ever forget Pearl Harbor? But I say that unless we're vigilant, our nation might forget Pearl Harbor. As an example, I offer to you today's Philadelphia Inquirer. It has one small mention of Pearl Harbor on the front page, but no story until page 8, and it's a short story at that. How dare them not cover such a seminal, watershed, and historic event as the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And I'll leave it at that, but believe me when I say that it's our responsibility, our duty, our mission as relatives, ancestors, and as patriots to make sure that this organization and its mission never end, and that Americans always remember Pearl Harbor and what happened there in 1941, and most importantly, the men and the women who survived the Japanese attack that day. And I have to tell you that I'm glad General Shapiro mentioned Vietnam, our Vietnam veterans, because I feel sometimes that our government makes our Vietnam veterans, to this day, beg and grovel for their VA benefits, exposure to Agent Orange and things like that. And I asked, as I mentioned rhetorically, that I hope that we never forget what happened at Pearl Harbor. But I'm invigorated a little bit when I see my friend Lynn Daisy here with her 2 children, my neighbors, Chris Buckley and Caitlin Buckley, who participate in this ceremony every year, and they're so loyal and so good and so devoted to this mission. So thank you very much, and at this time I have a letter from Governor Corbett that I'm going to read. Greetings. It is my pleasure to join with the December 7th, 1941 Pearl Harbor Remembrance Association to welcome everyone gathered here today for the 73rd Pearl Harbor Survivors Memorial Service at the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge. Pennsylvania appreciates the tremendous sacrifices our men and women in uniform have made in order to defend our rights and liberty. They deserve the utmost respect and recognition for their valor, devotion to duty, and unwavering commitment to protecting our nation. Since its inception, the December 7, 1941 Pearl Harbor Remembrance Association has remained dedicated to honoring our nation's heroes for their courageous attacks during the attack on Pearl Harbor. I commend the organization and all those responsible for organizing this memorial, and it is my hope that their example of service will inspire others throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for years to come. As Governor, and on behalf of all Pennsylvanians, I extend my sincere gratitude for our soldiers, for their service, and to all those who selflessly gave their lives for our freedom. It says soldiers, but I'm sure it means sailors, airmen, and Marines as well. Please accept my best wishes for a memorable ceremony. Tom Corbett, Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm going to present this to Alex and John. Thank you very much.
Thank you, time, we are always reminded that there are those among us who have loved ones no longer with them from Pearl Harbor. We do a roll call of members who were part of the original Liberty Bell Chapter Number 1 Pearl Harbor Association out of Philadelphia. Rabbi Abraham, Jim Donahue, and State Representative Mert will read these names. Thank you.
James Cummings, Schofield Barracks. Cornelius Martens, USS Castor. Dominique Spaziano, Schofield Barracks. Peter Dolan, USS Tennessee. George Calhoun, Fort Ruger. Paul Puskar, Schofield Barracks. Dale Lyons, Ford Island. Charles Kovacs, Schofield Barracks. William O'Toole, Schofield Barracks. Dorothy Bogdan, USS Solace. Joseph Zimmerman, USS Tucker. John Kevin, Naval Hospital. William Tench, Hickam Field. Raymond Genetti, Schofield Barracks. Floyd Murray, Fort Shafter. Henry Gregory, Schofield Barracks. John Durchek, USS Reed. Vincent Massey, USS Pennsylvania. James Madden, USS Utah. Grace Lally, USS Solace. James Sweeney, USS Solace. Joseph Hudrick, Wheeler Field. Harold Johnson, USS Detroit. Werner Ronner, Schofield Barracks. Wesley Thompson, USS Whitney. Elmer Rauchan, USS Honolulu. John Shields, USS Mugford. Leon Solomon, Schofield Barracks. Felix Borowski, Wheeler Field. William Wheatley, USS Farragut. Glenn Plank, USS Cassin. Raymond Reed, Schofield Barracks. Louis Mites, USS St. Louis. Robert Saloff, USS Phoenix. David St. John, USS Ontario. Joseph Couture, Schofield Barracks. George King, Schofield Barracks. Charles Heilman, USS Case. Joseph Dionisio, Schofield Barracks. William Fisher, Schofield Barracks. Joseph Chertik, Schofield Barracks. Thomas Rabig, Schofield Barracks. Patrick McGarvey, Hickam Field. Francis Rosenberg, Fort Shafter. Charles Thompson, USS Sumner. John McCormick, U.S. Navy Mobile Hospital No. 2. George Biggs, Wheeler Field. Chester Shapansky, Schofield Barracks. James Ashcraft, Hickam Field. Cleo Blanchard, Wheeler Field. Raymond Minger, Ford Island. Peter Elmer, USS Honolulu. Richard Lovenstein, Wheeler Field. Alexander Sherman, USS New Orleans. Albert Rice, Schofield Barracks.
Thomas Kingsley, USS Phoenix. Albert Clance, Schofield Barracks. James Campbell, Wheeler Field. Charles Hardy, USS Nevada. Neil Gertie, Camp Malakoy. Antonio Comparatore, Schofield Barracks. Francis Reese, USS Curtis. William Pink, Hickman Field. George Durford, USS St. Louis. William Welch, Fort Shafter. Paul Reisig, USS Pyro. Earl Jones, Schofield Barracks. Ted Kamen, Hickam Field. Robert Gable, Schofield Barracks. Michael Galville, USS Dale. Lawrence Huber, USS Tennessee. Joel Backner, USS California. Jetto Di Simone, Schofield Barracks. Keith Milliken, USS Phoenix. Joseph Wiesikowski, Fort Destry. George Mengel, Wheeler Field. George Roth, USS Argonne. Edgar Washington, Hickam Field. Henry Grinn, USS St. Louis. Charles McCullough, Schofield Barracks. Charles Appleton, Hickam Field. Richard Wallen, USS Antares. Roger Lowry, USS Phoenix. John Amendola, Schofield Barracks. Fred Cummings, USS Phoenix. John Wytunich, Hickam Field. Francis Pearl, Schofield Barracks. William Wydell, Schofield Barracks. John McNeil, USS Reed. John Morgan, USS Phoenix. Ralph Frederick, Wheeler Field. Thomas Sanford, USS Detroit. Theodore Fallon, Marine Barracks, Pearl Harbor. Walter Sebold, Hickam Field. Robert Train, USS Honolulu. Kenneth Herndon, USS Nevada. Frank Malnick, USS Ralph Talbot. Anthony Manco, Fort Shafter. Herman Diesel, Hickam Field.
Paul Dovey, USS West Virginia. William Elmer, Fort Kamakea. Robert Materi, USS Dobbins. Reed Burks, Pearl Harbor. Robert Snyder, USS Detroit. Vincent Bonina, Hickam Field. James Barnes, Schofield Barracks. Dominic Gentili, Marine Barracks, Pearl Harbor. John Kelly, USS Sacramento. Walter Marshkowitz, USS Whitney. Linus Babineau, USS Rigel. Charles Calkins, USS Alowin. Thomas Wendt, USS Rigel. Edward Guarino, USS Maryland. Frank Marshall, Schofield Barracks. Thomas Gill, USS Honolulu. Walter Sobosiak, Hickam Field. James Harrison, Ford Island. Stephen Jordan, USS Dewey. Donald S. Kryson, USS Maryland. William Snow, USS Cummings. Jasper Forbes, USS Cunningham. Paul Brown, USS Shaw. William Brown, Bellows Field. Harvey Volk, USS Vesta. Al Marks, USS Dobbins. Irv Gerben, Kanoa Bay. Paul Moyer, Schofield Barracks. Ralph Carter, Schofield Barracks. John McElroy, USS Helms. Curry Kimmy, Fort Kamehameha. J. Smith, USS Phoenix. Ralph Carter, Schofield Barracks. George Smith, USS Ash. Roland Hoffley, USS Argonne. Robert Martin, Hickam Field. Honorary members: Harry Fash, Philip Antoniello, Edward Miller, Catherine Horansky, Marie Gregory, and Robert Mashler.
Before I bring the rabbi up for the benediction, I'll explain the rest of the ceremony after he is done. We allow the survivors and their family members, immediate family members, to proceed out of the chapel first. If you'll please join us next door at the altar of the battles. We do a wreath laying there. We also do a 21-gun salute, and we play taps. At that moment, everything is completed, and we invite everyone across the street to the luncheon. Thank you. Rabbi?
Don't stand yet. It would be very unprofessional for me if I didn't thank the General for his remarks today. But we do have another day with destiny. Next Saturday. Go Navy. Beat Army. I have to do that. I want one person in particular recognized today. In 1997, I came back into the United States Navy Reserve after a 10-year hiatus, after being a supply corps officer for 10 years, now as the chaplain. And one of the people I met at Willow Grove Naval Air Station was Sherry Jones. There has not been a brighter angel in the military community in the city of Philadelphia or the greater Philadelphia area than Sherry Jones. There's a handsome lad standing in the back. Come forward. I have a little history with this family, but it's great history. Mom, stand next to him.
I can. I can do fun today.
How old are you now? 23. I knew you when you were. Okay. Introduce yourself.
Ryan Jones, I'm Sherry's youngest son. My brother couldn't be here, he's in New York right now, pursuing acting, 27 and
But Ryan is a soccer star and has in fact done something that not too many people can do. He played in the Maccabi games in the state of Israel. And you have to be very good to do that. The General said this is the greatest generation, and I completely concur. I have read Tom Brokaw's book, and I do too many funerals of the greatest generation from my congregation. And my congregation includes, still to this day, death camp survivors with tattoos on their arms. They are very grateful and thankful to this nation and to you who served at that time, for they wouldn't be here today if you had not done what you did. And we thank you for that as well. And now, I'll ask you to stand. You'll bear with me as I use both original language and the English language to give the benediction. Original language being Hebrew. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, as we prepare to depart these solemn proceedings, we ask that you bless all of us. Prosper us in all of our undertakings. Let no evil overtake us. Grant each of us safe passage, so that we will arrive at our desired destinations in safety and peace. O Lord, we recall the blessings of the ancient priesthood in the temples in Jerusalem, when they gave the following blessing to the people. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord lift up his face to you and grant you peace. And I would add the words, Akshav u'le'olam va'ed, now and forevermore. Amen.
If the front row could proceed out into the altar, and if everyone would mind taking a seat and wait till they depart the chapel, I'd appreciate it.